Hey guys, energy. It's one of the most fundamental requirements of our modern society. Countries around the world are investing heavily in new power plants that use a range of methods to keep the light switched on. From the largest fossil fuel burners ever built to dams that have completely changed the local environments. Join me for today's video. I'm going to explore 15 of the most incredible power generating facilities. Number 15. The Jebel Ali Power and Desalination Plant, United Arab Emirates. The Jebel Ali Power and Desalinization Plant covers almost a 2-mile stretch of land along the Persian Gulf between the port of Jebel Ali and the Jumeirah district in the United Arab Emirates, around 25 miles to the southwest of Dubai. It's made up of 9 individual power plants and it's operated by Dubai's Electricity and Water Authority and holds the record as being the world's largest gas-fired power plant, as well as being the largest seawater desalinization plant to have ever been built. It's got an installed capacity of 8.6 gigawatts, which provides almost the entire country's power requirements. It's also able to process around 490 million gallons of water a day, which again provides virtually all the water that's needed in Dubai. The power is mainly produced by burning natural gas or other gases that are released during oil production, but it can also use diesel and heating oil if supplies run low. The volume extracted within Dubai isn't enough to keep the plant running at full capacity, so it relies on importing gas from the neighboring states and countries like Abu Dhabi, Iran, and Qatar by dedicated pipelines. And as well as being the largest, this is also one of the most efficient gas-fueled power plants in the world. There's a reason why they chose to also build a desalinization plant at the site, and that's because the waste heat that's produced during power generation is used in the multi-stage flash distillation process for desalinization, as opposed to being released into the atmosphere. While it may be controversial to still be burning fossil fuels to such an extent, at least this facility makes the most of as much of the energy that's produced as possible. Number 14. Three Gorges Dam, China. Crossing one of the widest points of the Yangtze River near to the town of Sanduping in Hubei province of China, the Three Gorges Dam is currently the largest power station on the planet. Surprisingly, it was built there not just because of how effective it would be at generating power, but because the river used to be prone to extreme flooding, and the end result has been a much more productive agricultural industry downstream, as well as the creation of a more stable shipping route along the entirety of the river. The first idea of a dam crossing the river in that location was suggested in 1919, and surveys of the site took place in the late 1930s and 40s. Due to lack of funds, attention was focused elsewhere for several decades, but construction finally began in 1994, and it was fully completed by 2015. The dam itself is made from concrete and steel and is an incredible 7,600 feet long. The reservoir behind it is 410 miles long and just under a mile wide, and enables the water to constantly flow over 34 main generators that have a total combined production capacity of 22,000 megawatts. To put this into perspective, the largest power station in the United States is the Grand Coulee Gravity Dam in Washington, and its maximum capacity is less than a third of what the Three Gorges Dam can produce. Number 13. Taichung Power Plant, Taiwan. Found in the city of Taichung in Taiwan, the Taichung Power Plant is the 4th largest coal-fired power station in the world. It was originally built in the early 1990s with 4 coal-fired units, each of which could produce up to 550 megawatts. But in the time since, it's been developed with a further 6 coal-fired units, as well as 4 gas turbines and 22 wind turbines. In total, the power plant has a rated output of 5,800 megawatts, which goes a long way towards providing Taiwan's electrical grid with what it needs. But there have been concerns in recent years surrounding the environmental cost of this. The first 8 coal-fired units, for example, are believed to consume around 12 million tons of bituminous and 2.5 million tons of subbituminous coal each year, most of which is sourced from Indonesia, Australia, South Africa, and the United States. And in 2018, the plant was rated as one of the top 10 most polluting power facilities on the planet, having released over 28 million tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This averages to around 3 pounds of carbon dioxide per kilowatt-hour of energy that's produced, which is significantly higher than many other coal plants, let alone greener alternatives. The plant, along with another nearby one, has been linked with as much as 70% of the air pollution in central Taiwan, and while there are plans underway to increase the installed capacity, in terms of this expansion, it includes a huge reduction in how much fuel is burned by using more efficient processes. And the hope is that within a few years it'll release far fewer pollutants and still be able to provide the energy that's needed to support Taiwan's continued development. Number 12. Grand Inga Hydroelectric Project, Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Congo River, which is the second largest river in the world when measured by discharge volume, has an enormous basin, which represents around 13% of the total landmass of Africa and runs from the mountains in the East African Rift to the Atlantic coast in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's the only river in the world that crosses the equator twice, and is also rare in the way its huge flow is almost constant, thanks to the fact that there is always a rainy season feeding into it from either side of the equator. This makes it the ideal river to build a series of hydroelectric power stations on, and the Grand Inga Hydroelectric project will see a series of dams being built, along with 7 generating stations at the Inga Falls, which is around 140 miles upstream from the mouth of the river. The sheer scale of this project is almost unbelievable, and it'll cost an estimated $80 billion to complete. This means that each generating station could well be owned and operated by different companies or nations, but it would undoubtedly be a complete game-changer for the region. If the feasibility studies prove to be correct, the final output of this project could be in the region of 70 gigawatts, making it easily the largest power station on the planet by a considerable distance. Number 11. Gravalin Nuclear Power Plant, France. France is one of the world leaders in terms of developing nuclear power technology, and of all the facilities in the country, the Gravalin Nuclear Power Plant, which is in the commune of Gravalin in the northwest of the country, is the largest. It's actually the biggest nuclear power plant in Western Europe, with 6 pressurized water reactors that produce a combined total of 5,400 megawatts, which is 5.9% of all the energy produced in France. With the reactors coming online in the 1980s, the 5th and 6th were originally intended to be exported to Iran, but after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, the decision was made to install them at Gravalin instead. The designs were seen as so safe and reliable that, at the time, they formed the basis of the CPR-1000s designed by China, and the technology is still replicated in much newer designs to this day. One of the revolutionary aspects of the plant at Gravalin, though, is how they use the cooling water that carries heat away from the reactors. It is, of course, fully monitored to ensure it hasn't been contaminated, but is then channeled through a facility called Route de l'Aquaculture, where farmers breed European sea bass and gilt-head breams, which apparently grow significantly faster in that environment. Number 10. The Badla Solar Project Park, India. Located in Badla in the state of Rajasthan in India, the Badla Solar Project Park is currently home to the largest solar farm in the world. This facility, which covers an area around 17 square miles, is so arid and dry that it's seen as virtually being uninhabitable, with temperatures usually ranging between 115 and 118 degrees Fahrenheit. So, with almost constant sunshine, it was the perfect place to produce solar energy. Built in 4 stages, the park officially reached full capacity in March of 2020, where it began producing 2,200 megawatts, which in comparison is around 25% more than the Hoover Dam is capable of generating. Despite costing an estimated $1.3 billion to build, the fact that the fuel for the farm doesn't cost anything and there's vastly lower maintenance requirements than at other power facilities, with robots being responsible for keeping the panels clean, this means that the energy produced there is far cheaper than other options, and it proves that in the right location, solar energy is more than cost-effective and feasible. And based on the success at Badla, a number of other similar projects are now planned elsewhere around the world. Number 9. Gansu Wind Farm, China. Despite being known for continuing to build fossil fuel-based power plants, China is also heavily invested into renewable sources too, and the largest project currently under construction is the Gansu Wind Farm in the country's western Gansu province. The chosen site, which runs along the edge of the Gobi Desert, is one of the most consistently windy places on land anywhere in the world. The planned 18 wind farms, which will all be operated from a central control center, will, when complete, be able to generate as much as 20 gigawatts, which will not only make it the largest wind farm on Earth, but also one of the biggest power plants of any type. The full project's been split up into several stages, and work began in 2009. There are already at least 6,000 turbines installed, which have a current combined capacity of around 8 gigawatts. The government hopes that it will be fully finished by the end of the decade. There is still a significant problem that the Gansu wind farm is facing, though, and it's the fact that it's around 1,000 miles from the port cities that would benefit most from the power. There's currently a lack of infrastructure to transport this energy from where it's being created to where it can be used, so a lot of it is going to waste. It's a similar problem to what's happening in the United States and elsewhere, where the national grids aren't really designed to carry huge amounts of power from the most effective renewable sites to where it's needed, and this will take huge investment in the coming years to rectify. Number 8. Aswan Dam, Egypt. Holding the record for being the largest embankment dam on Earth, the Aswan Dam was built in Egypt between 1960 and 1970. Crossing the Nile by the city of Aswan, it was actually the second dam to be built in that location after the lower dam was completed in 1902, and the project was seen as crucial to Egypt's economic development. For thousands of years, the banks of the Nile have been fertile grounds thanks to the annual floodwaters that brought nutrients to an otherwise harsh environment. But while the floods are predictable, the extent of them isn't. This means that some years there'd be a perfect balance, but in others there'd be too much water that will destroy the crops, or nowhere near enough and would lead to a drought. The completion of the new dam at Aswan finally gave control over the floodwaters and has meant that that flow can be regulated and used for irrigation and energy production at the same time. The dam is 364 feet tall and 2.4 miles long. It's also produced a reservoir called Lake Nasser that covers an area of over 2,000 square miles and contains 32 cubic miles of water. Despite requiring the relocation of 100,000 people, the destruction of a number of historical sites, and long-term effects on the coastal erosion, the dam is seen as a resounding success for the management of water along the lower parts of the Nile and comes with the added benefit of an installed energy production capacity of 2,100 megawatts. Number 7. Dogger Bank, Northeast England. The UK is committed to deriving the vast majority of energy from renewable means by the end of the decade, but with so little reliable sunlight, the main resource to take advantage of there is the wind. The country now has countless wind farms on land and in coastal regions, but there's one project that's currently underway that's on a whole different level. Known as Dogger Bank and costing around $15 billion, it'll become the world's largest offshore wind farm, and some of the stats here are almost unbelievable. It's being built between 78 and 180 miles off the northeastern coast, where the water is unusually shallow, which allows for fixed foundation turbines to be installed. Split into 4 separate farms, when it's finally complete, there will be around 313 megawatt turbines in total, which will give the entire development a theoretical maximum output of 3.6 gigawatts. Due to their location, there aren't the same concerns of their visual impact as there is on land, and this means that the turbines are supersized and have blades that are 721 feet long. Amazingly, one spin of these would be enough to power an average home for 2 days, and the whole project is expected to generate power for as many as 6 million homes, or 5% of the country's total requirement. Number 6. Siwa Lake Tidal Power Station. In 1994, a huge seawall was built across Siwa Lake in northwestern South Korea to control floods and to create a reservoir to provide water for agricultural purposes. While it was successful in reducing flood damage, the unintended consequence in the reservoir was the buildup of pollution to such an extent that it wasn't safe to use on crops, and authorities began looking for a solution. They found the best way to solve it was by reintroducing seawater into the reservoir to flush out the toxins, and realized that one way they could do this was by converting part of the wall into a tidal power station. This involved the installation of 10 25-megawatt submerged bulb turbines, which are driven by the incoming tide. At an estimated cost of $560 million, its official installed capacity is 254 megawatts, and its yearly output is over 550 gigawatt-hours. This makes it by far the largest tidal power station on Earth, and it's an added bonus that its construction has improved the environment at the same time. Of course, on the grand scheme of things, this isn't a huge amount of power in comparison to other energy sources, but it's thought that the more tidal stations like this that are built, the more the technology will improve to one day make it far more viable. Number 5. Kaida Azam Solar Park, Pakistan. With an arid and mostly sunny climate, the Punjab province of Pakistan is an ideal place to leverage solar power, and that's why it was chosen as the site of the country's newest energy facility that, when completed, is expected to have a production capacity of 1,000 megawatt-hours. Named the Kaida Azam Solar Park in honor of the man who founded Pakistan, a 6,500-acre plot of land was set aside for the venture, with the plan being that the government would invest the initial $130 million needed to complete the first phase in order to attract private investment for the subsequent ones. This pilot stage was completed in 2015, and with a capacity of 100 megawatt-hours, has seen the installation of almost 400,000 solar modules over 500 acres. It's seen as an undoubted success. This has already been expanded to a capacity of 400 megawatts after investment by Zonergy. And despite increased competition from other energy producers, the plans for the solar park remain on track for it to be fully completed within the next decade. If it is, it'll easily become one of the largest solar energy production facilities on Earth, and will have the same power output as one of the pressurized water nuclear reactors at the Virgil C. Summer Power Station in South Carolina. Number 4. The Geysers Geothermal Power Plant, California. For more than 12,000 years, Native American tribes had been aware of the magical qualities of the steam and hot waters that bubble from the ground in the Mayacamas Mountains in California. And in the 19th century, a number of health retreats opened there too to attract tourists from across the country. The early 20th century saw a new opportunity develop, however, when the owners of one of the resorts built a geothermal plant in 1921 to power their lights, and the region has now become the largest geothermal field in the world. Taking advantage of the huge source of heat that comes from a large magma chamber that's around 4 miles beneath the surface, there are now more than 350 different wells in a 30-square-mile area. Amazingly, when combined, they provide around 60% of the power demand of the coastal region between the Golden Gate Bridge and the Oregon state line. And with an annual output of 6,500 gigawatt-hours, it represents 20% of the total renewable energy that's produced in all of California. This is the type of renewable energy project that's only possible in rare situations, and shows how much future energy fulfillment will vary from place to place depending on the geography of an area. There's also a concern about how far the wells at the geysers are pushing their capacity, because in order to generate energy, water is injected into the underground cavities, and this has been shown to be responsible for regular minor earthquakes that are recorded in the mountains. Number 3. Shin Kori Nuclear Power Plant, South Korea. In the small village of Kori, which itself is on the outskirts of South Korea's second-largest city, Busan, is the Kori Nuclear Power Plant, which is currently the largest operational nuclear power station in terms of output in the world. The first reactor on the site began producing electricity in 1978, with a further 3 that came online in the 1980s. But a further expansion began in 2006 that saw another 4 reactors added to the facility by 2019, that brought the total to 8. With a total capacity of 7,400 megawatts, although it never actually reached that figure, it's the new 4 reactors that represent some of the latest designs and advances in technology. The first 2 were Generation 2 OPR-1000 reactors, while the second set of 2 were Generation 3 APR-1400 reactors. Another 2 APR-1400s are also under construction at the site and expected to be in operation by the late 2020s. One of the biggest differences between these and earlier designs are the inbuilt safety precautions that make them far easier to shut down and contain if an emergency arises. But they're also far more efficient and require less fuel to produce more power. The new reactors can, for example, produce more than double the power that was generated by the first one built at Kori, and that's why Kori 1 has now been closed for good, with the process of fully decommissioning it beginning in early 2022. Number 2. Tarbella Dam, Pakistan. Built between 1968 and 1976 on the Indus River in Pakistan, the Tarbella Dam is by far the largest earth-filled dam in the world. It's around 65 miles to the northeast of Islamabad and was conceived to help control water supplies in the country following the signing of the Indus Waters Treaty in 1960, which designated the 3 eastern rivers in Pakistan as exclusive to India. Measuring 485 feet high and 1.7 miles long, it covers the distance between an island in the river to the bank, with the other side blocked by 2 smaller dams and spillways. The Tarbella Reservoir behind it covers a surface area of 100 square miles, and with a maximum depth of 450 feet, the lake has a total capacity of 3.4 cubic miles of water. It's rarely ever filled that high, though, because the site was chosen with this capacity so it could be topped up during monsoon season and then gradually released during the dry times of the year to ensure a constant water flow downstream and through the connected irrigation channels. The power station, with its 17 turbines, currently has an installed capacity of 4,800 megawatts, but this will soon be expanded by almost 50% following an extension that's being funded by the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and the World Bank. Despite the huge costs, Tarbella Dam is generally regarded as a great example of how dams can be used to regulate the water flow within a river system in a responsible way, while producing a large amount of electricity to supply the surrounding region. Number 1. The ITER Nuclear Fusion Reactor, France. One of the problems with producing huge amounts of electricity from renewable means is the sheer amount of space that's needed to replace a coal-powered generator with solar panels or wind farms. But a new technology that's currently being trialed in France could well change all of that. The most efficient means of energy production that we know of is the process that takes place in the center of the sun, which is known as nuclear fusion. And an international coalition is trying to make this a reality on Earth, too. The International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, or ITER for short, has been described as being one of the most ambitious and complicated engineering projects of all time, and by far the most expensive science experiment ever conceived. At an estimated cost of around $55 billion, however, the rewards could be life-changing. If the ITER shows nuclear fusion to be possible in a contained environment, then it could solve the problem of our ever-increasing need for clean energy. Work began on the site in 2010, and it's currently 75% complete, with the first elements expected to be switched on in 2025, and full fusion power, if everything goes to plan, taking place by 2035. The reactor itself will use deuterium and tritium as its fuel, and the plasma that's created will be controlled by magnets. The vacuum vessel designed to contain all of this will weigh almost 5,500 tons, while being 64 feet in diameter and 37 feet tall. But so much of this is protective shielding. The internal experimental space will be just 21 feet across. While solar, wind, and wave power may well be the green energies of choice right now, the ITER will hopefully represent the leading contender for the ones of the future. I'll see you next time.
Watch our Machines playlist for more top 15 videos about awesome machines. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best machine videos.